Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants from across the globe, good day to all of you and warm welcome to the official launch of the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition, in short, CEET, an independent advisory council to the UN Secretary General. My name is Tariq Mtaira and I am the Director of the Department of Energy at the UN Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and will be your host for this ceremony. On the onset, I would like also to welcome Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, who is joining us live in this launch event and will deliver closing statement at the end of the ceremony. Amina Mohammed, we are very pleased to have you with us today. The schedule for our ceremony: shortly after this, we will hear a video message from the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, on the reason to establish the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition. This will be followed by keynotes from the co-chair of the steering committee of the Council, Mr. Lee Yong, and Professor Jeffrey Sachs, further elaborating on the role and activities of the Council. We will then have a brief dialogue with prominent engineering experts on the role of engineers in charting engineering pathways for carbon neutrality by mid-century. Thereafter, we will listen to statements from members of the steering committee, including UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, the United Nations Framework Conference on Climate Change, UNFCCC, NL Foundation, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, and UN Habitat. We will end with closing reflections and remarks from Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed. With this note, we are set to open the ceremony with the message from United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
Climate change is a global crisis caused by human activities. Our decisions can also solve it. With technology and economics on our side, we can achieve both universal energy access and decarbonized energy systems. That demands progress in three areas. First, ensuring energy access for all. Second, rapidly tripling investments in renewables and doubling the rate of energy efficiency. Third, phasing out coal and stopping investments in new coal, oil and gas exploration. All of these will take more ambition and policy intervention. It will also take experts with technical knowledge and skills to plan and help implement an inclusive and sustainable pathway to decarbonization. To put it simply, we need engineers. Today, I'm proud to announce the launch of the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition. This council will focus on engineering solutions to decarbonization, including scaling up key technologies, analyzing sectoral and integrated pathways at regional and local levels, and assessing zero carbon and breakthrough technologies. By outlining engineering pathways for comprehensive decarbonization, the Council will contribute to the growing coalition to achieve net zero by mid-century. The Council will be co-chaired by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network and the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and will engage partners from the United Nations, academia, and business sectors. We know that carbon neutrality by mid-century is technically achievable, but we must act now. We are counting on this Council of Engineers to help advance the energy transition, to guide us as we take on new technologies and leave old ones behind, and to help ensure a just transition that fosters sustainable land use management alongside decarbonization. Together, we can and must achieve a sustainable, equitable, and clean energy transition. Thank you.
That was the opening statement from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Thank you, Secretary General. Let me now welcome the co-chairs of the steering committee, starting with Mr. Lee Yong, the Director General of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and followed by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, the president of the UN Sustainable Solution Network. With this note, let me welcome Director General Lee Yong of the United Nations to deliver his opening remark. Just a brief about Mr. Lee Yong. In addition to serving for the last 8 years as Director General of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, he had also an extensive career as a senior economic and financial policy maker, as Vice Minister of Finance for the People's Republic of China and member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank for a decade. Mr. Lee was involved in setting and harmonizing fiscal, monetary, and industrial policies, and in supporting sound economic growth in China. Mr. Lee also gave a great importance to fiscal and financial measures in favor of agricultural development and small and medium enterprises, the cornerstone for creating economic opportunities, reducing poverty, and promoting gender equality. Mr. Lee Yong, may I invite you to deliver your statement.
Thank you, Tariq. Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to join you today at the launch of the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition, a body that will bring together engineers and energy system experts to contribute to the UN Secretary General's coalition to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Under the leadership of Secretary General, UNIDO is pleased to co-chair this initiative alongside with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, the president of the Sustainable Development Solution Network, and contribute to the drive towards decarbonization of the energy system by 2050 through the science and technology. Decarbonizing our energy system by mid-century is a much needed task that requires ambition, collaboration, and the investment in low carbon technologies. Development in science and technology at the global and national level are critical levers for progress across these 3 areas. Science and technology will support the commercialization of the new technology and the transfer engineering knowledge to drive the technology adaptation and adaptation at the national level, giving us insights into challenges related to deployment of the technologies on the ground. The science will support our understanding of the technical and financial feasibility of various technologies, which are essential to ensure its scaling up. The Council of Engineers will play a pivotal role in analyzing the sectoral and the integrated pathways to help our efforts on decarbonization. It will be a resourceful platform to channel advice from a globally diverse group of experts to ensure a just and gender-responsive energy transition. Ladies and gentlemen, UNIDO, in collaboration with the UN Habitat and the FAO, recently concluded a report in support of a high-level dialogue on energy. The report draws on inputs from the leading organizations and identifies key areas for action on technology, innovation, and data that are very pertinent for this group we are launching here today. The report concludes that while the decarbonization of the power sector is progressing, it is not enough. We must expedite progress in the deployment of clean energy technologies in any use sector, particularly in industry and transport. Colleagues, Excellencies, we must work on stronger policy alignment and a shift towards mission-oriented innovation to address the challenges of the end-use sectors to provide a sustainable energy that benefits all. This is a focus of topic that we will explore at this forum. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we need to collaborate to ensure the energy innovation, governance, and the cooperation aligned with our 2030 and 2050 targets, that we create a transparent and competitive markets with the same level playing field for all. To do so, we have to focus on 3 areas. Firstly, to collectively work on improving policy coherence and planning at the national level in a way that integrates issues related to use of energy in end-use sectors, such as industry, and not only on the supply of energy. Secondly, we need to increase the commitment of governments, private sector, academia, and the civil society towards mission-oriented innovation and technologies that are effective, even if not fully commercialized. It is critical to increase investment and improve cooperation in this area to help develop new technologies and build a learning cycle to accelerate the adoption of new technologies. Finally, we need to invest in targeted support to bridge the skills gap in engineering and digital literacy through curricular development, training, reskilling programs, with particular attention given to women and the youth. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the success of the 2030 agenda and the 2050 net zero goals relies on actions we take today, actions that drive sustainable development, economic prosperity, and climate neutrality through the utilization of every talent, actions that leave no one behind. The international community has a vital role to play in driving a sustainable and inclusive clean energy transition to combat climate change. UNIDO is committed to work with the SDSN engineers from around the world and the CEET steering committee to achieve our sustainable development and energy ambitions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director General Lee Yong, for your encouraging and also motivating statement on the role that we need all to play in this endeavor and the role of engineers and the Energy Council. Let me now invite Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who was the second co-chair or the co-chair of the Council of Engineers. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, in addition to being the president of the UN Sustainable Solution Network and chair of the Lancet COVID-19 Commission, is also a university professor and director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. Professor Sachs has been also advisor to 3 United Nations Secretary Generals and currently serves as an SDG advocate under Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Sachs was twice named among Times Magazine 100 most influential world leaders and was ranked by The Economist among the top 3 most influential living economists. I'm also a fan of Jeffrey Sachs' book club, which brings tremendous useful insights to the world. The floor is yours, Professor Jeff.
Dr. Tara and Director General Lee Yong, let me say how delighted I am today to be launching the UN Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition, and how honored I am to be doing it together with you, Director General. Your leadership is wonderful. UNIDO is so important for the world, and you guide it so brilliantly. So it's a thrill for me that we're launching this today. And of course, we're launching a new council that will also bring together many UN agencies. You mentioned one report that UNIDO has just partnered with the UN system, and we will have UNDP, DESA, UN Habitat, Sustainable Energy for All, UNCTAD, UNESCO, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat, and other parts of the UN system, so that we can help to bring together all of this leadership and energy and knowledge, and also to help the Secretary General in what I think is the hardest job in the whole world, trying to help move the whole world in a new direction. I want to thank the Secretary General for the great advice and leadership to get this started, and the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed for her absolutely invaluable guidance and support. And I also want to pay special thanks to NL, which is a company that is forging the way to a zero carbon energy system. And NL's CEO, Francesco Storace, has been giving me great sound advice for years, and NL Foundation is a partner all along the way in launching this. And I want to thank Carlo Papa, who heads NL Foundation, for getting us to the launch today. You know, it's pretty clear that there's a path to zero that makes sense, and that each country in the world now has the opportunity to find a path that in its own context makes sense. Last week, the Department of Energy in the United States released a pathway to 2050 showing how wind and solar can provide about 90% of the electricity needs for the US by 2050 and give a radical decarbonization with a price tag of zero, basically. In other words, no incremental cost compared to the dirty fossil fuel space system that we have now. And I think that that is really the fantastic situation that we're in, where we have so much trouble, but the good news is we have a way out. There has been such a dramatic advance in technologies in so many related areas. China has brought down the costs of renewable energy by basically factor 100 during the past 25 years, that we can talk about a solar and wind-based energy system with all the sophistication of storage and resiliency and all the rest that's needed without incremental cost. And that is what the engineers are helping us to understand and to guide. All of the pathways that I know for decarbonization are based on the same pillars: zero carbon electricity, mass electrification of transport, of home heating, of industrial processes, the use of clean zero carbon power for producing green fuels like hydrogen. And so we can see the way forward. But I think it's fair to say that most governments still are struggling with defining the technological pathways going forward. Most countries are not producers of many of these technologies. And I would say analysis is often many years behind what's really possible right now. This transformation is still viewed as some high cost, unknowable transformation, whereas in fact, it is both low cost and highly knowable. And I think bringing together world-leading engineers are going to help the whole world to understand the practicalities and the main knowns, as well as the remaining not quite knowns that we need now to take on through expanded research, development, demonstration, and diffusion. There are hard sectors, no doubt. The hydrogen economy is, I wouldn't say in its infancy, but there's a long way to go and a long way to build out the hydrogen economy. There's still many question marks over the future of zero emission aviation. There are many questions about zero emission ocean shipping. There are many questions about zero emission metallurgy, for example, steel making. There are pathways, there are great ideas, but we don't have the clarity there that we have, for example, in power generation itself. So the work of the council will be at least four things. First, to help countries understand the pathways to decarbonization. Second, it will be to help guide both the UN system and the world in prioritizing the right areas for research and development and demonstration in the still remaining hard sectors. A third goal that I have for the Council is that we'll help to promote cooperation among neighboring countries, which is really one of the keys to decarbonization. Wherever you look in the world, having good neighbors helps. Maybe it's sunny over on your neighbor's side while it's cloudy on yours, or maybe the wind is blowing across the border while it's still in yours, and having an interconnected grid will make a huge, huge difference in lowering costs, lowering storage needs, and building resiliency. China has been promoting the global energy interconnection through its GuideCo, Global Energy Interconnection Development Cooperation Organization. And I'm really keen for the Council to take on that idea of energy interconnection, because I think that it is one of the absolute keys. We also want this Council to help identify how to bring the smart systems, the smart grids, the AI, the 5G technologies to bear, so that whether it's in transport or distributed power generation or other areas, we're making full use of the advances in digitization and what that can offer. The fourth area is, as the Director General just mentioned, in skills training. The Sustainable Development Solutions Network is a membership organization for the UN of 1,500 universities and think tanks around the world. And that means that we have an opportunity to help disseminate knowledge, also to bring it from these wonderful institutions, to bring it to bear, to share the information, to make sure that we're all operating at the cutting edge of engineering knowledge by having access to the best knowledge and best advice. So we will be sure to use the SDSN network for training, for courses, for online seminars, for disseminating the knowledge that will come out of the UN Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition. Again, let me say how thrilled I am that we're launching this today. It's kind of in a nick of time. The actual news on climate, we all know, is dramatic. Today's report by another great UN agency, the World Meteorological Organization, says we have a 40% chance of having a 1.5 degrees Celsius world in some year in the next 5 years. That's how close we are to the brink right now. We had a tough, kind of shocking IPCC report last month. The new report today by WMO and its partner organizations is no less startling. We have our work cut out for us. We have to move urgently. Secretary General will be having several summit events in the next few days at the UN with world leaders, then the G20, and then the COP26 in early November. This is the moment. I'm so happy that we're getting started today. And again, Director General Lee, thank you for the partnership, and congratulations to UNIDO. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be working together with you.
Thank you, Professor Sachs. Indeed, we are so thrilled to work with you and your team. And as you rightly pointed out, we are at the nick of time, and in the lead up to the high-level dialogue on energy and COP26. This is really a timely launch. I take note of the 4 pillars that you and the Director General Lee Young highlighted for the role of the Council in terms of helping understand pathways, guiding the UN system, fostering cooperation between neighboring countries, and helping in skilling and knowledge transfer and dissemination. These are 4 important pillars, and we are thrilled to work together in delivering on these 4 pillars. With this note, I would like now to move to the second segment of our ceremony or launch event, by inviting prominent engineers to have a dialogue also on the role of engineering and the key challenges in the in that space. And I'm delighted to have with us Professor Jessica Transick and Dr. Mohammed Assobki, if I may invite them to turn their own cameras and join the panel. Just a brief introduction. Professor Jessica is a professor at the Institute for Data, Systems and Society at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Her research examines the dynamic costs, performance and environmental impact of energy systems to inform climate policy and accelerate beneficial and equitable technology innovation. Her projects focus on all energy services, including electricity, transport, heating, and industrial processes. And we are also joined by Dr. Mohammed Assobki, is a professor of energy engineering at Cairo University and is currently a member of the advisory board for the Joint Master Program Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency for the Middle East and North Africa between Cairo University in Egypt and Kassel University in Germany as joint program. Dr. Assobki has also worked as a consultant for a number of international projects and served as a CEO of the Egyptian New and Renewable Energy Authority in RIA. He also served as the founding executive director for the Electricity and Consumer Protection Regulatory Authority of Egypt. Welcome to the panel, both Professor Jessica and Professor Mohammed. A great honor and pleasure to have you with us today on this conversation and in this important ceremony of launching the Council of Engineers. Let me start, if I may, with Professor Transick. Your research spans across technologies within the energy system, and over the years, the economics of these technologies has changed dramatically. What, from your perspective, and giving the priorities now for the net zero pathways by 2050, what are you hopeful for in the future in terms of innovation in this space, and where do you see the greatest opportunities?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, I guess I'll say that the situation now is very different from where we were, just 10 years ago, even just 5 years ago, because of the advancements in a couple of key technologies. And those really, the standout examples are the renewable energy technologies, solar energy, wind energy, and also in lithium-ion batteries. And together, this handful of technologies provides a foundation on which we can build. And, as was mentioned by Professor Sachs, I agree that, this is a very promising foundation on which we can build. However, there remain challenges, and the innovations in the future have to be more comprehensive, covering all energy services, and also faster in order to avert the worst effects of climate change. So, just to give the audience some specifics, what we see in the case of solar modules is that costs have fallen by 99%. We estimated over 4 decades, and costs are continuing to fall. We recently published a very comprehensive review of the data on lithium-ion batteries, and we'll be coming out with some research on the reason for the advancements in lithium-ion batteries in a couple of weeks here. But those costs fell by 97% over 3 decades since the early 1990s. So these are huge changes, and these make me hopeful for 2 main reasons. One is that, as I mentioned, they provide this foundation to build upon to decarbonize the entire economy. And then the second is just that they show, and when we really look at the underlying mechanisms, they show how we can achieve rapid innovation in clean energy. This is very much possible, but we don't have another 3 decades. So the process, we need to be much more deliberate and then cover these energy services that were further from decarbonizing, like long haul transportation and certain industrial processes. So what I guess one thing I will say is that in terms of thinking about how to solve these challenges, address these challenges, we need a focused effort that involves engineering. It also involves business innovation, and it involves policy innovation. And I think the trick is that engineers need to become a bit more like policy experts. They need to understand the policy challenge. The policy experts need to understand the engineering challenge, and then, business as well, and sort of bring business into these conversations. But I am very hopeful that through a deliberate effort across policy, engineering, and business, that we can see even faster improvement going forward and decarbonize the entire economy. However, it really won't happen on its own. And I'm not saying that it will happen. I think it really remains to be seen. But I'm hopeful that we can do this. But it's really not, and one thing I'll say for this council is that it's really not about, we shouldn't really have in our minds an assembly line picture of, you have engineers working with policymakers and with business. I mean, that is, people may still have on a primary hat that is engineering or policy or business, but they also need to become familiar with these other two angles, if they're working in business with engineering and policy. So that is something that I think is important to emphasize.
Thank you, Professor Stransik, for these important insights, and you echoed the same challenge we face also when we try to deploy engineering solutions, where we really always need that multiplicity of skills to understand also the policy context and the business context. And you're absolutely right on pointing to the right issue there in terms of scaling up sometimes in many contexts. But your insight also on the importance for speed and sort of the comprehensive dimension of that, and that actually requires also bold policy, mission-oriented policy leadership to move the needle there. Let me take it from the perspective of informing policymaker, and that's why I want to invite Professor Al-Sobki, because I worked with you many years in the past, where you were advising the government on the energy transition, particularly in Egypt. You were leading the national agency working on renewables, but you had a strong technical working history in the engineering field. And so how does engineering help in informing the decisions of such agencies? Professor
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm really delighted to be part of this exciting event. As a matter of fact, I would like to second the importance of having both engineering and legislation together. They really need to go hand by hand. If I'll just give an example, in Egypt, we had around 6 years ago a number of legislation issued to promote the use of renewable energy, actually to promote the source of energy from renewable energies. And we had an exciting 5 schemes working together simultaneously. I mean, some of them were prevailing above more than the others, but they were implemented simultaneously, like BO type projects or feed-in tariffs or IPPs and so on. But all of these schemes were sort of pushing schemes. They are pushing for renewables, and legislator did help on that. On the other side, we did not have sort of creating the demand or developing the demand for renewables. So this is where I would like to name that as pulling schemes as compared to pushing schemes. For pulling schemes we need to encourage industry or in general end users to use renewables. And in this conditions, definitely engineers will have a role in developing certain techniques or knowledge regarding some of the implementations leading to reducing the cost. And that's quite important. That might be coupled with incentives as well as sort of binding legislation or pulling legislation. So that would stimulate engineers to work harder on developing more advancement in technologies leading to reducing the cost. Another issue here is actually, and I think in a number of countries in the world, subsidies, and that's a financial issue, I know, and governments work on subsidies and do have subsidies with different targets, either to address the needy or the poor, or to help in developing some of the development plans. But that's in some cases a double-edged sword, and it would really might cause a trouble to some of the industrial activities and the engineering activity. When you're saying some of the activities are subsidized, then these activities, for example, some of industries might be exporting goods and they will face dumping lawsuits regarding theirs. And now, the role of engineering here is really quite important to work on technologies to reduce the costs. And as clearly mentioned earlier by Professor Trantic and Professor Sachs, the achievement which China managed to, I would say, to lead the world in it, or to actually impose on developing engineering technologies, reducing the cost. So on the contrary, 10 years ago, we were saying that, for example, renewables are expensive, renewables are unpredictable, intermittent, and so on. But with some of the innovative engineering technologies and batteries and in continuing operation of the system, did overcome that. So engineering is quite important, and I would strongly recommend joint venture activities between national industries and international industries in the level of the different nations and so on.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Dr. Sobki, for highlighting also the interlinkages between design of regulations and what are the engineering capabilities on the ground to absorb the technology, to create the markets, and to create the balance between these two issues, but also how certain subsidies can also influence the incentives for engineering solutions to come onto the market. These are two important variables to keep in mind. I wanted to pick up on the statement from the co-chairs, both Professor Sachs and Director General Li Yong, sort of outline or clearly referred to the need for inclusiveness and just transition on this transformative roadmap. And I know that Professor Stransik, the theme of ensuring a just and equitable transition are central topic topic at COP26, but also your research has focused on equitable technology innovation. Maybe you can probably help us explain further what are what that has meant in your work and where the research gaps remain in this field to bring equitable technology innovation into the landscape.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so, in my work, we're developing data-informed models. Those are sometimes data-driven models, sometimes mechanistic models to develop insight to inform beneficial and equitable innovation, and focusing primarily on climate solutions. So let me just maybe start with defining equitable innovation. As I'm using the term, it means innovation that provides benefits that are accessible to everyone. And that would be, everyone around the world. How do we make that happen? The cost and the quality of service, have to be such that the results of any technology innovation is affordable and offers a high quality service to everyone. So this is not something that will happen. This is not something that tends to happen, by accident in the marketplace, because if left alone, the market will, tend to emphasize innovations that are more exclusive and they're more expensive. So if we take the example of electric vehicles, for example, if we leave the market alone, what will tend to happen is that, the first vehicles, and sort of for some time, for an extended period of time, the first vehicles would be those with a high battery capacity. Those will also be the ones that are the most expensive. They offer companies the highest profit margins, but they'll only be affordable to a small segment of the population. So here, one thing that can be very effective is a policy nudge that incentivizes, an earlier focus by companies on the lower battery capacity, less expensive vehicles, but also really pushes the advancements in battery energy density such that the battery capacities can rise more quickly, and while costs are also coming down. So this is something, so the role for research, and really my research in this area, is to find, to sort of be, allow us to be a little bit more proactive and to perform prospective studies so that we can understand what innovations are coming around, are on the horizon, and how they can be made more equitable. So as you can see from the example I provided, that often means studying technology. It can also mean studying behaviors. So we've done a lot of work on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, for example. And again, if left alone, the easiest solution is to kind of stick with these more expensive vehicles serving those people that have off-street parking. They tend to be people that, have higher households that have higher incomes. And, this would mean that the majority of the population doesn't have access to electric vehicles. They don't have off-street parking. In order to adopt an electric vehicle, they would need to find places to park their vehicle where they can charge, while they're at home. So what we've done in that research is to really, very, very sort of intentionally collect data that covers entire populations. That's the other thing, is that the data tends to be more available for people, for sort of technologies and more advanced technologies that are serving, again, just the more wealthy segment of the population. So we have to be very intentional about collecting travel activity data for entire populations. And then when we do that, what we're able to conclude is, we were able to identify a handful of locations that are priority locations for charging station placement, so that the entire population in a given area would have easier access, be more able to adopt an electric vehicle, especially as the infrastructure is rolled out. Many countries have plans to roll out infrastructure. I mean, some countries like Norway are very far advanced in that respect, but most countries are still, kind of getting started here and rolling out electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So I guess, what I'll leave the audience with here on this point is that as engineers, again, we need to, and as policymakers and as business leaders, it is very important to be very intentional about this question, like who is the innovation serving, who will benefit from these innovations as we move toward decarbonization. Some people will say, well, you can't do both things at the same time. Let's just draw down emissions and, we'll figure out the rest later. But I really think that's not the way to look at the problem. In fact, we know that many activities in our modern economy contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, and it is important for human well-being to support innovation that benefits everybody, but it's also important for mitigating climate change. And being more deliberate about that, I think, can really go a long way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for these insights as well. I mean, I think we have experienced similar challenges when we look about the energy access, where you want to deliver electricity to households or productive use, but then the products on the market are designed in a way that they are coupled with stable certain electricity demand or need or volume, and rethinking the whole solution from the end use and the supply side requires a different engineering solution. That has been quite a challenge, and so this is an important variable. And I take note of also the need to nudge the innovation toward this kind of equitable or needs of the beneficiaries in different segments of society. With this note, I mean, I think I would like to put the question to Professor Sobki. It's also contrasting the energy or the engineering solutions between deployment between advanced economies and emerging markets, like the context in which you have tried quite for considerable time to push for the uptake of renewable energy in Egypt. So maybe you can sort of help us understand the key challenges, these different socioeconomic settings that should be taken into consideration as the Council works to identify a solution for the clean energy transition ahead.
Yeah, well, actually, the challenges, especially in the energy sector, maybe about 5 or 10 years ago, was the cost of the technology itself was high regarding new technologies, renewable energies at the time, as compared to conventional resources. And sort of the mindset of the service providers, most of them were engineers, is like was their comfort zone. They are happy with technologies which they are familiar with, which are stable and they can handle well. A challenge was moving to new technologies. I mean, if we may say, renewable energies were at the time using new technologies, but not anymore, was quite important to have a change of mindset in that and try to work on development in these technologies. I would say it's quite important also to have a strong link between the education, the training, the after graduation training, and so on, in order to help startups. I'll just give an example here. As related, for example, for rooftop PVs, in a way. We are not a rainy country. We have in Egypt a lot of sand and dust and so on. So the cleaning process of rooftop PVs is a challenge. And in some cases, you end up with zero output, almost zero output from these PV panels and so on. The need, I would say, new startups, young engineers worked on developing maybe through reverse engineering or so on, some of the cleaning mechanisms which were low in cost and effective in doing that. So helping startups is quite important, and maybe these startups also needs to join other developed. They can grow. They can be helped in helping them exporting their products and sort of promoting their products and so on. So that's quite important. But also we need to be careful that they don't be bought up by giants in the market and so on. So they need an entity, an identity, regarding and to grow up themselves. Another issue is really, I will take the example Professor Tranzik mentioned regarding electric mobility and so on, and I fully agree with her. The market might be small in the beginning, but if we manage to, regarding through smart grids and so on, to make the charging facilities accessible in many places at a low cost, and that would require some effort from the engineering part, maybe on the charging issues, as well as the metering issues and so on. So having to, if we can do that, that definitely can be done in an effective way by young engineers who still are fresh in their mind and regarding using smart grids and so on. So that's in doing that. Again, also, I would say startups can also develop testing facilities for the engineering products which are used. And that also is a line of business which engineering can help. And I am really for having to do that or to support that by new graduates or who are ready to investigate and ready to risk.
Indeed, Professor Subki, you're highlighting many of the ecosystem variables that also influence the degree to which these solutions can be deployed and adopted in a different socioeconomic context. And you're pointing out to certain advantages and disadvantages or challenges facing engineering solutions because of the degree to which the ecosystem can nourish and support early starters, but also geography and social context that can facilitate this adoption. I am mindful of the time that we have. It's a wonderful conversation we're having, important insight for this council, but the organizer keep asking me to make sure that we stay within the timeline. Final quick reaction from both of you, because as you've heard from our co-chairs, this council will encompass a broad group of engineers who span expertise across sectors and geographies. In less than a minute, what is your most important engineering challenge that this group should address in the year ahead?
Yeah, so I guess I'll, should I start? Yes.
Yes, please.
I'll keep it quick. Okay, so actually, I think the most important challenge is how we're addressing the innovation in this space. And what I would highlight is the importance of really understanding the nature of the problem and not jumping too quickly to a conclusion about a hardware fix, but designing solutions around the non-hardware components as well. So just to give a quick example, if we're thinking about decarbonizing jet fuel and air transport, we may want to also at the same time consider the possibilities for rerouting, redesigning routing networks and flight patterns. If we're thinking about hydrogen, we want to be thinking about the integrated energy system and the limits of predictive models for using excess power that's available for electrolysis, as well as thinking about the timing of different solutions. So that's one point. So really thinking about the nature of the problem and thinking about the hardware and the non-hardware components of that together to fast track the innovation process. And then the other is just finding ways whenever we're talking about climate change mitigation anywhere around the world, really talking about innovation in the same, not as an alternative to reducing emissions, but the opportunities for innovation. We really need to draw on the creative ideas and the unique solutions that may come from different cultures around the world.
Thank you, Professor Transi. So very briefly, yes, your one most important solution.
Well, I have a couple of points here. We are embarking into the arena of hydrogen now, and I think we would need some engineering innovation in the production process of green hydrogen, especially green hydrogen, and that's quite important. And I think engineering will have quite a vital role in reducing the cost of the different components to have green hydrogen. And another thing which would require actually the joint work of engineers as well as economists and legislators regarding virtual trading of energy, coupling that with in order to avoid a lot of the hardware infrastructure in connecting different energy networks around the world. We need to work on virtual trading of energy. So that has an engineering input as well as an earmarking process from both the economists as well as the legislators.
Professor Sobki, Professor Transi, thank you so much for your insight and for your recommendations. And we look forward to having this conversation more and more through the Council in the days and months to come. A pleasure to have you with us, and thank you for taking the time. It's a pleasure to really have you with us in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Let me now move to the third segment of our launch event to hear reflections and statements from our steering committee members. And we would like to start with the statement from Mr. Leo Zenman, the Undersecretary General for the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to join Mr. Li Yun, Director General of UNIDO, and Professor Jeffrey Sachs, President of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, at the official launch of the Council of Engineers on Energy Transition. Energy is a key to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Universal access to clean, affordable, and modern energy services is indispensable to eradicate poverty, empower women, achieve many other SDGs, and leave no one behind. Ensuring access to modern energy services for all must be a top priority at all levels. At the same time, to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, we need to rapidly accelerate energy transitions even as we expand energy access. Unfortunately, on the current trajectory, the world will fall short of achieving SDG 7 on energy. To address this challenge, the UN General Assembly has mandated a high-level dialogue on energy, which will be convened by the UN Secretary General on September 24th. This is the first global meeting on energy under the auspices of the General Assembly in 40 years. As the Dialogue Secretary General, I call upon all stakeholders to come together on the occasion of the high-level dialogue and share practical solutions to build a sustainable energy future for everyone. Engineers are a vital part of this community. We cannot get it done without their engagement. I applaud the establishment of the Council for Engineers on Energy Transition. I would welcome its inputs and contributions in support of the high-level dialogue on energy and for accelerating the energy transition. Your work will be critical in the transformations needed to meet the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Let us ensure that we also eradicate poverty, address inequality, and leave no one behind. Together, we can accelerate action towards attaining SDG 7 and net zero emissions. I thank you.
Thank you, Undersecretary General Leo Zenman from the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA. Now we will hear from Patricia Espinosa, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Conference on Climate Change, UNFCCC.
It's a pleasure to address you only 7 weeks ahead of the COP26 discussions coming up in Glasgow, the most important climate talks since the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015. In Glasgow, nations face a significant workload on issues such as adaptation, mitigation, finance, capacity building, boosting their climate ambition, and much more. We are racing against the clock. We need action now. We need decisions now. Last month's Working Group 1 report from the IPCC was unequivocal. Recent changes in the climate are widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and these changes are already impacting every region on Earth, both on land and in the ocean. The report showed that unless there are rapid, sustained, and large-scale reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, including CO2, methane, and others, the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees will be beyond reach. We clearly need to make a deep and significant transition throughout all sectors of society to a low-emissions future, and the energy sector is central to that work. We wholeheartedly welcome this new independent advisory council of high-level engineers and experts to advise the UN system on this energy transition. We have an incredible amount of work to accomplish. The scope and scale of the transition we need is monumental, but with your help, it is achievable. We are already seeing rapid improvements in the technologies related to renewable energy, as well as an embrace of its supporting technology throughout the world. This includes wind and solar energy, batteries, and digitalization. And more nations are putting low-emission strategies and, of course, renewable energy at the heart of their national climate action plans, or NDCs. While COVID has certainly delayed some of those plans, by August 2021, 117 parties have communicated their new or updated NDCs. This represents 61% of 191 parties that have ratified the Paris Agreement. It covers 45% of total world population and 75% share of world's total GDP. A further 32 parties have communicated their low-emission development strategies. I fully understand that this is only a beginning. We clearly still have far to go. But we are moving in the right direction. While the number of countries and corporations that have pledged to achieve net zero emissions has grown rapidly over the last year, we cannot get ahead of ourselves. What we must remember is that most pledges are not yet underpinned by near-term policies and measures. That means there's still a lot of work ahead with respect to realizing the technologies and policies that can accelerate transition, address uncertainties, and ensure maximum benefits for both mitigation and adaptation. In short, good intentions are not enough. Action must follow words. Most of the countries and businesses that have pledged to achieve net zero emissions have spelled out some elements vital for their success in this area. They include access to technology solutions, enhanced financial resources, international cooperation, capacity building support, and market-based solutions. Here, United Nations agencies can and should play a pivotal role. And this is why we need the expertise of the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition. UN climate change is well positioned to provide inputs to CEET on emerging issues in climate action, but it will also benefit in receiving information on up-to-date science and technology from world-class engineers and academics. CEET could, for example, play a key role in providing strategic guidance in several areas. This includes identifying areas of work to prioritize and pinpointing specific knowledge gaps and activities of interest to the UN system. This might mean proposing solutions to the challenges of scaling key technologies. It could mean identifying zero carbon technologies in support of the global energy transition, or perhaps developing guidelines to support the implementation of NDCs. Simply put, we cannot achieve the implementation and the goals of the Paris Agreement without a significant transition from the energy sector. And your input is essential to making that happen. I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia Espinosa, Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, for the inspiring words, but also for highlighting the strategic areas in which the Council of Engineers can contribute to. Now, I would like to invite Carlo Papa, the Managing Director of Enel Foundation, for his reflections and statement. Carlo.
Yeah. Yes, good evening, and thank you very much for having me here. Thank you very much to Professor Sachs and to all the team. I'm indeed very honored, and I think very conscious of the serious responsibility that we have in fundamentally what I see gathering talent, and we already have a huge amount of talent today on the show, and channel advice that are properly. But let me say that I think what Professor Transic say, to imagine and design something that is for people, it's all about this. I mean, we should put people at the center of what we imagine, design, build, and operate. Because at the end of the day, as Mr. Espinosa was saying, the Paris Agreement is all about people. It's about people health, because we all know that if we lower our pressure on the planet, on the way we energize our planet, the health of the people will be benefit directly. And Professor Transic has demonstrated in many studies, for example, the impact of sustainable mobility on the health of people. And second, we know that it's about impacting the wealth of the people. We already seeing, we said one single, today only one time the word access, but we know there are people without electricity in the outskirts of the Lima and in the city center of Addis Ababa. So there is a huge amount of people that can benefit and should benefit from the energy transition. And we should make sure that no one is left behind, not only in Paris, but everywhere else in the world. The second most important things that I have in mind is that we should, while we are imagining the future, we should focus on what is doable today. And I'm referring specifically to the energy mix of Spain. If you are familiar with that, you know the amount of renewables that are going into the mix that only a couple of years ago people were saying is impossible. It's possible, it's happening, it happens today in Spain, and it's replicable elsewhere, as the report that Professor Sachs was mentioning for US it's explaining. If we are talking about network resiliency, we know that there are networks that are more resilient than others already because they are digitalized. So we should push forward this example. And third and least, I know Jessica will not hate me, but if I want to buy an electric car as a city car today, there's an offer for an important, car manufacturer for $5,000, 1999 euros per month, versus the traditional city cars that is 50,000 euros. So the reality today is happening, and there are examples that we can deploy while imagining better solution. So I look forward to work with all of you and hope we will channel the right advice to the UN. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlo. And indeed, we look forward to working with you. And NL Foundation has been a key instrumental in supporting the process and moving us forward. Thank you for your kind and encouraging words. I would like now to invite for the statement from Hao Liang Zhu, the Assistant Secretary General for the United Nations Development Program, UNDP.
Tarek?
Yes.
Just wondering whether the Deputy Secretary General, I think, may have a time constraint, just to check on that. Not absolutely sure.
You can go ahead. I'm listening. Please go ahead. I would love to.
Very good. Sorry, just wanted to protect your time.
Thank you very much.
I was told to keep out of the picture until I was asked to speak. So I have been listening very attentively. Thank you. I'm still with you.
Thank you, and apologies, Mohammed, for keeping you waiting. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, on behalf of UNDP's Administrator, Hakim Steiner, I'm delighted to join you for the launch of the Council of Engineers on the Energy Transition. The Council's establishment could not be better timed. Next week, the UN will host the first high-level dialogue on energy in 40 years. The dialogue is a key milestone in bringing global attention to and action on ensuring access to sustainable, affordable, reliable, and modern energy for all. Today, 750 million people currently live without any form of energy access, and millions more lack access to clean cooking, putting lives at risk and threatening the safety and the security of women and girls in particular. As the UN Chief Executive Board recently observed, sustainable energy solutions are crucial to aid countries in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, while also creating green jobs, empowering women, reducing greenhouse gas emissions in line with the Paris Agreement, and advancing other sustainable development goals. The high-level dialogue is an historical opportunity to deliver a global roadmap for the achievement of SDG 7 and to deliver the systems change that support inclusive green economies and ensure that such transitions are fair and protect the most vulnerable. The progress to date is promising. More than 100 governments, businesses, cities, and civil society organizations have signed energy compacts committing to deliver the policies, finance, technological innovations, and the skills needed to bring clean energy to all by 2030. As the co-chair of UN Energy and the high-level dialogue, together with our partners, Sustainable Energy for All and the UN DESA, UNDP is committed to supporting all efforts that will permanently eradicate global energy poverty and accelerate a clean energy revolution. UNDP would like to congratulate Professor Jeffrey Sachs and all the colleagues who have contributed to bringing the Council to life. UNDP looks forward to supporting this important effort in the months and the years to come to ensure that the Decade for Action delivers a just, healthy, sustainable future for all.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary General, UNDP, for your welcoming statement. Let me now invite the final reflection statement from Mr. Andrei Zikos, the Chief of the Urban Basic Service Section of the UN Habitat, for your brief intervention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tarek. Deputy Secretary General, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to all from the Executive Director of UN Habitat, Ms. Maimouna Mouad Sharif. And in starting, I should actually mention that I'm sitting at a location where there's currently a power outage, so you'll see around me a little bit dark. On behalf of Habitat, I'm delighted to be part of the launch on behalf of Habitat for the Council of Engineers for Energy Transition. And at UN Habitat, we would really like to reflect on the contribution of cities towards energy transition and also the pathways towards carbon neutrality by 2050. Energy consumption is by far the biggest source of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions, responsible for 76% worldwide. The energy sector emissions come from transportation, electricity and heat, buildings, manufacturing and construction, emissions, fugitive emissions, and other fuel combustions. And up to 3/4 of this energy is actually consumed in cities. Renewable and sustainable energy deployment plays a critical role in reducing the energy generation-related emissions. However, despite global efforts to promote the use of renewable energy, its share in total final energy consumption is still only 17%, growing at the same rate as renewable resources deployment. We need to speed up and embrace all solutions to achieve our goals. Looking at centralized and decentralized, small and large scale, we need to use the potential of cities to contribute to renewable energy generation. On a similar note, up to 1/3 of the global greenhouse gas emission reductions can come from energy efficiency and energy demand management measures, an area which is normally not really given much attention. And again, those can mostly be achieved in cities. It is against this background that UN Habitat has been working closely with partners to champion the promotion of sustainable energy options and low carbon designs for urban settlements, including for the provision of basic services, as well also for buildings. Equally, although innovative policies and technologies continue to emerge and bring positive benefits to the energy sector, the impact of COVID pandemic has left us in a very different place from that foreseen in early 2020. Conversely, at the same time, the pandemic could also have a positive impact on reaching the goals. In several economies, a decline in interest rates and accommodative monetary policies by central banks means that base lending rates will stay lower for longer, bringing access to affordable financing for clean energy, which has long been facing challenges. Recovery plans designed to kickstart economic growth post-COVID, protect workers and create jobs, and could provide a substantial boost to the deployment of renewable energy technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, at UN Habitat, we view CEET as an important body to advocate for energy transition agenda in cities. And we really look forward to supporting this initiative, but also to setting up collaborative frameworks of applying the recommendations at the city and local authority level. One of these opportunities for collaboration is the upcoming World Urban Forum in Poland in June next year, and this year's World Habitat Day, which will be commemorated early October, with the theme of accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world. With this, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andre, for the statement from UN Habitat. Mindful of the time, I'm so sorry for keeping you all waiting. And now I would like to hand over to Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed for your closing remarks, reflection, and guidance to the Council.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we do.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, dear Jeff, dear friends, members of the council, I really am honored to be at the end of this event with you. I have been listening to some of your conversations, and really they have inspired. And I think about that as we really try to lean towards implementation and the acceleration that we have to keep the promise of the 2030 agenda in the next 9 years. So honored to close the event that launches this Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition. I think the person that mattered most to me in giving me my training was actually an Irish engineer. So I feel very close to you because I still use the wise lessons that he gave me over 11 years in my early career. Suffice to say that the Council really pulls together a wealth of expertise across the sectors and regions, finding technical solutions to overcome one of the greatest threats of our time. And so thank you, Jeff, for really pulling together the very best, really tough. There's so many more out there. Each one of you has huge networks. The recent 6th assessment report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has made it very clear climate change is here. It is a global crisis and it is caused by human activities. And I always say that they're man-made, and if women were in charge, we wouldn't be this badly off. So we're getting in charge. We must urgently transition away from fossil fuels that make up more than 80% of the global energy mix and account for more than 75% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So decarbonizing the world energy system by mid-century to meet that 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement will require ambitious collective action to transition to renewable energy. It will also require huge amount of political will and actions from the leaders around the world. In addition, as jobs are transformed by the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, the OECD estimates we will need to reskill more than 1 billion people by 2030, especially our youth. And I think this is why we need the Council of Engineers for the energy transition. You have the technical knowledge, skills, and abilities that we're going to need for an inclusive and sustainable pathway to decarbonization. The skills that we talk about are in a new world where technology is so much a part of what young people will be engaging with. It could be the leapfrog that we see in developing countries if we can find the incentives and the case to be made for investments in these transitions that we're talking about. This Council of World-Class Engineers reflects a balance of sectors and geography because it will take action by all of us to achieve this transition. It isn't too late. We sell hope day in, day out here at the United Nations. So we still have time to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, but we have to act now. On Monday, we'll be having a closed door meeting. The Secretary General will be calling on those that really need to act in the global north, in the global south, to get to our net zero. 1.5 degrees is already brought sooner rather than later, and so it is urgent. Our upcoming COP26 in November of this year represents a decision opportunity in that regard. And let me just note here that the next COP will be an Africa COP, and that'll be a time that we will be transitioning to the world stocktake. This council will directly contribute to global efforts to address the climate crisis, and its work will inform the work of our resident coordinators and UN country teams across the world, over 131 countries, advising countries on decarbonization pathways and increased capacities. I think it's pertinent to note that we will be seeing the NDC report come out in the coming days. It's not a good story, but we have seen in some of the new NDCs, strengthened NDCs, a real focus now on adaptation, but there's still a huge gap to help countries put in the policies and the pipelines that are necessary to get those investments and sustainable development going. So I'd like to thank the President of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network and the Director General of UNIDO for co-chairing this really important initiative. I'm calling on all engineers around the world to join CEET and to help build a just and sustainable energy transition. We have a lot of work to do, and I've heard today how many of you have already started rolling up your sleeves. So welcome on board, and let's begin the journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
TSP, for your
Thank you.
strong support and leadership.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, if you want to say any closing remarks.
I just want to thank the Deputy Secretary General and thank everybody in this great venture. Thank Director General Lee. I think we have our work cut out for us, but a fantastic opportunity and a great UN system, and we're going to make this work. You can count on it, and it will be a fantastic opportunity to build.
Can I just say that I'm very welcoming of all the women that I've seen in this council. It's amazing. And I really look forward to working with you. And of course, Lee Yong, we have lots to do.
Yeah.
So thank you also for making this happen from the UN side.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such a pleasure with Jeffrey Sachs and my friends, colleagues, under the leadership of you and also SG. I listened very, very carefully all the interventions. I believe this is a right group to move agenda ahead. UNIDO is committed to that. Myself is committed to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. With this note, I bring the session to a close and the work will start ahead of us. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Deputy Secretary General. It's an honor and pleasure to have you with us and to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.